She walked into the small-town police station with nothing more than a calm smile and a simple request. Dressed in plain clothes, with no fancy jewelry or badge to show off, she looked like just another ordinary woman passing through. The officers at the desk barely lifted their eyes, exchanging smirks as if she didn't belong there. One whispered a joke under his breath, and another chuckled, shaking his head. To them, she was nobody, someone easy to ignore. But what they didn't know was that appearances can be very deceiving. From the moment she spoke, her voice carried quiet confidence, but the officers only rolled their eyes. They mocked her questions, dismissed her warnings, and treated her like she was wasting their time. One officer even leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking as if he had already figured her out. They thought they were dealing with a powerless outsider. But behind her gentle tone and unassuming presence was a truth that would flip their world upside down. As the minutes passed, their arrogance grew, but so did the quiet tension in the room. Something about her calm composure made a few officers glance at each other, uncertain for the first time. Who was this woman really? Why wasn't she rattled by their mocking laughter? And what was she hiding that none of them could see? Because in just a few moments, the same officers who thought she was ordinary would realize they had underestimated the wrong person, and it would be too late to take their words back. The woman stood there patiently, letting the laughter and whispers fade around her. She didn't rush, didn't raise her voice. Instead, she laid a small folder on the counter, sliding it slowly toward the officer who had mocked her the loudest. He barely glanced at it, brushing it aside as if it didn't matter. But for a split second, his eyes caught something inside a name, a seal, a detail he couldn't quite ignore. His smirk faltered, though he quickly tried to hide it. No one in that station knew her history, or how far she had traveled before stepping into their building. To them, she was just a stranger who wandered in on a slow afternoon. But she had come for a reason, one that tied directly to their town, their department, and a truth buried beneath the surface. What seemed like a casual visit was anything but. Every step she had taken to get there had been deliberate. Every word she spoke measured. Still, the officers leaned on their own pride. One tapped his pen on the desk, another checked his watch, clearly thinking she'd leave soon. Yet the way she watched them calm but sharp and settled a few in the back of the room. There was something in her eyes, something that suggested she knew more about them than they were comfortable admitting. Whispers started between two younger officers, curiosity creeping in despite the laughter. Who was she really? And what could possibly be in that folder that made even their most confident colleague hesitate? The room grew heavier, though no one wanted to admit it. The officer who had pushed the folder aside finally picked it back up, flipping through the first few pages. His smirk was gone now, replaced by a crease in his forehead. He didn't say a word, but the silence was enough to catch the attention of everyone else. The woman didn't move, her hands folded loosely in front of her, as if she had all the time in the world. One of the younger officers stepped closer, trying to peek at the folder. "What is it?" he whispered, but the older officer ignored him, his jaw tightening. Whatever he saw inside wasn't what he expected. Meanwhile, the whispers spread. Some of the officers kept joking to mask their unease, but a few had started watching her carefully. Something about her stillness unsettled them more than if she had shouted or demanded respect. She seemed to know the station better than they knew her. At the same time, outside the building, a black sedan had been parked for nearly an hour. Most of the officers hadn't noticed it, but one did. He walked to the window, narrowing his eyes as the car's tinted glass reflected the late sun. "Hey, anyone know who that belongs to?" he asked, but no one answered. The woman's eyes flickered briefly toward the car before returning to the room. Her calm smile never faded. Whatever was unfolding wasn't just about her, it was bigger, and the police were standing right in the middle of it without even realizing. The officer holding the folder finally slammed it shut, his face pale. He stood, clearing his throat, but his voice cracked when he spoke. Where did you get this?" The question hung in the air, and suddenly the mocking silence was gone. Every officer in the room froze, their eyes darting between him and the woman who hadn't moved an inch. She tilted her head slightly, her calm expression unchanged. "I told you," she said softly. "I came here for a reason." Her words weren't loud, but the certainty behind them carried more weight than a shout ever could. The black sedan outside shifted, its engine humming as if waiting for a signal. One officer at the window cursed under his breath, reaching instinctively for his radio, but the woman's voice stopped him cold. "Don't," she warned, her eyes locking on his. For the first time, fear flickered in the room. The younger officers, who had laughed at her earlier, now looked uneasy. One of them whispered, "Who is she?" But no one had an answer. Even the chief, who had remained silent in the corner, stepped forward, his jaw tight. The woman finally took a step closer to the desk, the echo of her shoes sharp against the tile. "You thought I was ordinary," she said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "But you've all been living in a story you don't understand." The air grew tense, every second dragging as though the walls themselves were waiting for what would happen next. A sharp knock suddenly rattled the front doors of the station, pulling every head toward the sound. The timing was too perfect, too deliberate. The black sedan outside was no longer idling, it was now parked directly in front, its lights cutting across the glass. Two figures stepped out, their silhouettes tall and purposeful, but their faces hidden by the glare. The chief stiffened, his hand hovering near his belt. "We weren't expecting anyone," he muttered, though the unease in his tone betrayed him. The younger officers looked at one another nervously, their earlier confidence gone. The woman's smile widened just enough to unsettle them further. "I told you," she said quietly, "this isn't just about me." Her words landed like a warning, though no one could decipher exactly what she meant. The officer who had read the folder clutched it tighter, his knuckles white. "Chief, you need to see this," he whispered, shoving the papers into his superior's hands. The chief scanned the first page, and his face darkened, his breathing growing shallow. Whatever he saw connected directly to the strangers now walking into the building. The doors creaked open, and the station filled with a silence so heavy it pressed against every wall. The figures paused at the threshold, scanning the room before stepping inside with measured calm. Now, the police weren't mocking or laughing, they were waiting, tense, unsure of who their true enemy might be. And the woman at the center of it all remained perfectly still, as if everything was unfolding exactly as she had planned. The two figures stepped fully into the room, their footsteps echoing against the tiled floor. Every officer straightened, some instinctively reaching for their radios, but none dared move first. The chief gripped the folder tightly, his voice low but urgent. This connects all of us," he muttered, his eyes flicking from the papers to the woman. The strangers removed their sunglasses, revealing calm but authoritative stares. One of them spoke with quiet certainty. "You were warned months ago, and you chose to ignore it." His words weren't directed at the woman, they were aimed at the chief. Murmurs rippled through the station as the younger officers looked around in confusion. The woman finally broke her stillness, stepping forward so that the tension in the room focused on her again. "They thought I was ordinary," she said, her voice steady. "But I've been sent to uncover what's been hidden here." Her hand rested gently on the folder, as she turned toward the officers who had mocked her earlier. "And the truth is written in every page you dismissed." The chief's face grew grim as the strangers confirmed it. Evidence of corruption buried deep in the department, covered up under his command. The laughter, the arrogance, it all crumbled as the officers realized they had been mocking the very person sent to bring justice. But just when relief seemed near, the woman leaned closer to the chief and whispered words no one else could hear. His eyes widened in shock, his hands trembling. Whatever she revealed wasn't just about corruption, it was something darker, something only he understood. And for the rest of the room, the mystery deepened all over again. The chief stood frozen, the color draining from his face as the woman pulled back, her words still echoing in his ears. The rest of the officers stared in stunned silence, waiting for him to respond. Finally, he lowered the folder and looked around at his team. The arrogance that once filled the room was gone, replaced by unease and guilt. The two strangers from the black sedan stepped forward, placing firm hands on the chief's shoulders. "It's over," one of them said, and for the first time, the station felt the weight of truth settling in. The younger officers shifted uncomfortably, realizing that their mocking laughter had blinded them to the warning signs all along. The woman gathered the folder from the desk and glanced back at them, her calm smile unchanged. "Remember this," she said softly. "It's never the loudest voice in the room that carries the most power.